Dear friends, welcome to this week's virtual Drasha. This week we have the incredible privilege of Parshas Kisavon. The Parsha begins with the beautiful, meaningful, and dramatic mitzvah of Bikurim, the obligation that the farmer has to bring his first fruits to Yerushalayim, to the Beis HaMikdash, and hand the basket over to the Kohen. And as part of this mitzvah, the Torah recounts, actually the Mishnayos in Maseches Bikurim recount the incredible fanfare that went along with this mitzvah. And the farmers would be bringing their first fruit. The Mishnah writes that the shopkeepers in Yerushalayim would close up their stores. They would line the streets to greet the farmers as they came. And of course, again, when the farmer reached the Beis HaMikdash and he stood in front of the Kohen, there was an entire recitation, what we call Mikra Bikurim. And this Mikra Bikurim, this recitation began in Perek Chav Vav Pasuk Gimel, chapter 26, verse 3. You have to go to the Kohen, who is in charge, in control of those days. V'amarta, love this, what you should say to him. V'amarta elav, higanati hayom la'Hashem elokecha. I hereby announce, I say before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my God, Kibasi ala aretz asher nishpa Hashem lavosinu laseis lanu, that I have come to the land that Hashem has promised our forefathers. The farmer then launches in to essentially a synopsis of Jewish history, right? The Kohen takes the basket, he waves it, and then the farmer goes ahead and continues, and he says, Arami Ovedavi, and he begins where Rashi points out from Lavan. Lavan tried to destroy Yaakov. Yaakov survived. We went down to Egypt. The Egyptians tried to destroy us. And again, describing trials and tribulations, we called out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Egypt. And then again, kind of consolidating a little bit, HaKadosh Baruch Hu finally brought us to Eretz Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us this land which flows with milk and honey. And then the Mikra, the recitation, ends with the following phrase, V'ata. So this is Perek Chav Vav Pasuk, chapter 26, verse 10. V'ata, and now, I have brought the first fruits from the earth that Hashem has given me. You place it down before Hashem, and you prostrate and you bow before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Beautiful. Incredible. In general, the profundity of Bikurim is that if we could imagine the level of emunah, the level of belief and trust that one has to have in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Farming is not an easy profession. Farming is so much uncertainty, and we would imagine so much anxiety, and finally you literally realize the fruits of your labors. You finally have earned the opportunity to enjoy, and yet you take those first fruits and you bring it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, demonstrative of the fact of the recognition that everything comes from Hashem is incredible and dramatic. But I want to point something out which I think is interesting, that before the farmer begins his recitation, or I should say at the beginning of the recitation, the pasuk says as follows. The first part of the recitation is, Higarati hayom la'Hashem elokecha ki basi ala aretz asher nishpa Hashem lavosenu laseis lanu. I hereby stand before you, Kohen, right? And I'm making this declaration that I've come to the land that Hashem has promised to our forefathers. If you look at the end of the recitation, it switches into the singular, right? The farmer makes his whole representation of Jewish history, and then he says, V'ata, this is in Pasuk Yod, chapter verse 10, V'ata hinehevesi es reishis pri adama, I brought the first fruits from the land asher nasata li. I brought the first fruits from the land that have been given to me. So it's interesting that there's this switch. In the beginning of the recitation, it's about the land that Hashem gave us. And by the end of the recitation, it's about the land that Hashem gave me. Why this switch? Now, of course, there's a simple answer. The simple answer is that at the end of the recitation, the farmer is referring to his little piece of land. In the beginning of the recitation, he's really referencing the dynamic of the Jewish experience, the dynamic of our national experience. HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us from there, from Mitzrayim, and brought us here to the land that He has given us, the collective experience. By the end of the recitation, the farmer is kind of shifting to the personal experience. I've now brought the fruit from my land, right? I cultivated this land. I grew these fruits, and I'm bringing the fruit from my land. But perhaps there's something additional that is happening over here. Mikra Bikurim. And I think this also helps us to understand why Mikra Bikurim, why the entire Bikurim process was such a public one. There was so much fanfare around the Bikurim. Like I said, the shops would close. The residents of Jerusalem would come out and greet the farmers as they came. The animals were adorned. The baskets were adorned. All these things, such a big deal made out of Bikurim. And perhaps what's unfolding over here is something much more dramatic than simply bringing first fruit, which is not simple at all, which is a dramatic display of faith. But maybe there's something additional that is occurring here as well. See, in the beginning of Mikra Bikurim, essentially what the farmer does is he lays the groundwork. The good news is we were there, and now HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought us here. But let me tell you how we got here. And essentially, the farmer goes on to describe the entirety of Jewish history. And you know, Jewish history, as much as it has many twists and turns, at the end of the day, the story is actually quite a simple one. We were tranquil. Someone came and tried to destroy us and disrupt that tranquility. And someone unleashed barbaric brute force against us, sometimes with hands, sometimes just through machinations. But our story has always been that someone's been trying to undermine us. So it started maybe with Lavan, and then to Paro, and it's been so many others in between. The story of our people is the story of war, of enemies, of combat. Sometimes the combat takes place on an open playing field. Sometimes it takes place in the minds and the machinations of our enemies. But at the end of the day, there's always this struggle. And so on a national level, right, the farmer says, Arami Ovedavi, and Rashi points out that begins with Lavan. And then again, Ve'eroa, some of them made our lives difficult. But then Baruch Hashem, the Shalom saved us, and thank God we are here. And the farmer goes through this entire synopsis of Jewish history. And then I think something happens in the farmer's mind. Because, dear friends, you ever have this moment, this like epiphany moment, where you recognize that the story of our nation is also the story of us as individuals, just on a much smaller scale. The story of the Jewish nation has been, we say it in Pesach, Shebechol davadar omdim alinu lechalosenu. In every generation, something happens. And in every generation, someone rises up to obliterate and to annihilate us. And sometimes it's clear, like in the times in which we are living, like the events which were triggered from Shmini Atzeres, Tavshin Pei Daled, Simchas Torah Tavshin Pei Daled, October 7th, where we see that there's an enemy. And that brutal enemy, that brutal enemy which literally attacked Klal Yisrael on October 7th, has ignited a flame of enemies globally. And we see it, and we experience it, and we feel it. But the incredible part of our story is, with all of the adversity, all of the tragedy, all of the loss, we always rebound. The Ribbon Shalom, we say to him, Vayivi'enu ala makom hazeh. Kadosh Baruch Hu brings us to the makom for the farmers Eretz Yisrael. Vayitel us eretz hazos eretz avas chalav udvash. And then the farmer has this moment. He's like, you know what? That's my life also. Because, dear friends, don't we all experience this in our own ways? That life is tranquil, life is good, things are going according to plan, and then there's an enemy. Now, the enemy may not be something external. The enemy may be my own internal self-sabotaging mechanisms. The enemy may be life circumstances which are foisted upon me, not of my choosing. The realities that I never thought I'd have to contend with, but now I do. So what do? Right? Like the story of my people becomes my story as well. My nation, my beautiful nation, my beautiful Am Yisrael has been struggling for thousands of years. Literally, Shebechol dar vadar omdim alinu lechalosenu, ve'HaKadosh Baruch Hu matzilem yadam, Hashem saves us, vayivi'enu ela makom hazeh. And I think the farmer says like this, V'ata. The farmer, after he goes through this entire synopsis of Jewish history, the farmer says, you know what? V'ata, now in this moment I'm thinking about this. Hine hevesi es reishis peri ha'adama asher nasatali. The farmer says, you know what? It just clicked. I know what my avoda is. You see, Chavra, each of us have the Adama. We have the earth that Hashem has given us. What's your Adama? Your Adama are your life circumstances. Your Adama, excuse me, is your reality. That's your Adama. That's your Adama. Adama represents your set of life circumstances. And what's your avoda with your Adama? Hevesi es reishis peri ha'adama. What can I produce from the Adama's circumstances that I have been given? What can I produce from the reality that my life is governed by? What can I do with the set of circumstances which have often been foisted upon me. I think that the farmer is inspired by the story of our people and wants to adapt that narrative of his own. The story of our people as we faced adversity, and yet what do we say? And what do we say? Vayevi'enu ela makom hazeh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you took us from Adama that was difficult and challenging, and you brought us ela makom hazeh. And for the farmer, for the national perspective, that Adama hazeh means good, bracha, maybe periods of tranquility. And now the farmer says, okay, I got to apply those same ingredients of success that worked for our people, and to now go ahead and bring them into my personal life. And my personal life, viata means now. I've just gone through the entire synopsis of Jewish history, and I realize, here's what I'm willing to do. I have my Adama, I have my set of circumstances, and I have a choice. Maybe the Adama that I have is not the Adama that I want. Maybe the Adama that I have is not the Adama I ever dreamed would be my life, but this is the Adama I got. These are the set of circumstances I have, so what's my obligation? Viata, now I pledge myself, Hine hevesi es reishis peri hadama. I'm going to bring fruit from my Adama. I'm going to bring fruit from my circumstances. That's my avoda. The story of my people is the ability to produce fruit from whatever Adama we find ourselves in. The story of our people is the ability to produce something beautiful, something spiritually melodious, something spiritually luminescent, even from the most difficult of circumstances. And because of that, the farmer is able to say, right, you know what? When you read Mikra Bikurim, it's all about what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for us. But it's very important to remember that with everything HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for us, there's also what we do for ourselves. And how did Klal Yisrael make it through? How did they get from Mitzrayim, from Lavan, to Ve'yevi'enu ala makom hazeh, to bring it to Eretz Yisrael, to give us under the Eretz Zavas Chalav Udvash? Someone had to walk into the Yam Suf. Someone had to pick up the sword against Amalek. Someone had to wage the battles against Sichon and Og. So yes, of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does everything for us, but there's also what we do for ourselves. And the farmer, inspired by his own recitation, says, you know what? I'm going to take these ingredients that are the keys to success of our national existence. I'm going to apply it to my personal life. I'm going to take the Adama that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given me, the set of circumstances that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given me, and I'm going to allow my Adama to become fertile and produce fruit. The fruit of accomplishment, the fruit of holiness. Because no matter what the Adama that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that life has given you, you have fertile soil, and you can produce something beautiful from it. It's a lesson we speak about often, but a lesson that is no less important. At the end of the day, you might not choose the Adama you get, but you get to choose whether or not it remains barren and fallow, or whether you're willing to produce something beautiful and magnificent from it. That's our avoda. That's the secret of success for our people as a nation, and it's the secret of success for us as individuals. Klal Yisrael always takes the Adama we're given and produces beautiful peros. And Yidden, Jews, take the Adama we are given and produce beautiful peros as well. In this month of Elul, in these last few days of Tafshin Peidal 5784, a year that has been filled with, on one hand, so much bracha and so much beauty and so much goodness, but at the same time, so much loss and so much heartbreak and so much sadness. This is the earth. This is the Adama we've been given. And we Hashem to use the remaining days of this precious month to create beautiful and holy peros. Wishing everyone a good Erev Shabbos and a beautiful Shabbos Kodesh.